everybody. I'm Mike Rowlands with Junxion Strategy. We're a company that looks for visionary leaders and helps them to build world-changing organizations. And today on Dov Baron's Leadership Show, we're going to have a conversation about sustainability and social impact, legacy, and the importance of engaging the new generation of leaders, these millennials that are coming up the ranks, who really want you to be a more sustainable business. Stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us today on this episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty Leadership Interview Series, where today we're going to look at doing good while doing well. Is it a fantasy, or is it actually possible? If you're a new listener, a new viewer to the show, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in, we're about to go full Monty. If you're a regular, then there's certainly a big thank you to you, because you've made us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners, and we're honored and grateful that Inc.com cited us as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. GNA cited us in the top 10 podcasts for HR pros and employers. So thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. And as always, we need your help in staying relevant. So please get yourself over to iTunes, rate, subscribe, and review the show. We really appreciate that. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. Watching or listening to this show, you are either a high-level executive, an entrepreneur, a sales leader, or certainly a leader in some capacity. And depending on which generation you are from, what kind of leadership you grew up around will change potentially how you see this idea of social responsibility. Is it something that is the next evolution of business? Or you might see it as some hippie nonsense that is little more than a trend and will fade away pretty fast. Well, today we're going to dig in and actually find out. My guest today is Mike Rowlands. He is an accomplished entrepreneur, a consultant, and an advisor who works at the intersection, really, of business, community, and sustainability. He supports visionary entrepreneurs and leaders in organizations around the world, helping them to craft distinctive strategies, disrupt markets, and accelerate success. Mike is the president and CEO of Junxion Strategy, an international consultancy that nurtures organizations at the forefront of a new economy that serves for a common good. From his offices in Vancouver, yes, he's right here at the center of the world. New York is the Big Apple, we're the Big Lima Bean. And in London, England, Junxion works with clients in 4 continents, including multinational corporations, disruptive social enterprises, nonprofits, NGOs, and philanthropic organizations. So, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome Mike Rowlands.
Crowd goes wild. Fantastic.
Absolutely wild.
Love the intro.
Good to have you on, Mike.
Hey, it's a pleasure. I've really been looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, me too. And it's I was saying at the beginning there, of course, we're in the same city. You are literally about not even a 10-minute walk from where I am right now.
That's right.
But
yeah.
Due to Skype and connections and all the rest of it, this is probably the best way to go for now. We'll see, though. I'm looking forward to you and I actually sitting down and having a cup of coffee and another chat in the very near future.
We'll that happens. Sounds great.
Yeah. So let's talk about this. I was saying in the intro this thing about social economy, the new economy that serves the common good. I think a lot of people see it, certainly people who are 50 plus, see it as, another hippie phase, it'll go away, when bottom line is it all comes down to profit. So how do you answer that? Because that's got to be something you bump into right away.
Yeah, it is. We bump into it every day.
Sure.
And I'd offer you three responses to that. And the first is this notion of business being all about profit and nothing but the profit, thank you very much, is actually a relatively new notion historically, right? So this has been the way we've been thinking about business since the 80s.
Wow.
But in reality, when the business corporation was first formed back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, most companies had a corporate charter, and that corporate charter required them to fill some sort of public good.
Wow.
And if you didn't have a corporate charter, you didn't get to start the business. And at that time, companies could not own other companies, and they couldn't deal with anything other than what was prescribed in their corporate charter. So something changed in the middle of the 20th century when we got distracted and decided that the real reason for business was simply shareholder accumulation of wealth. Okay, so that's fine.
So the god of that change was Gordon Gekko.
Yeah,
greed
that's
is,
right.
Greed is good.
Here's a grand caricature of that perspective.
Absolutely.
Right?
But that's interesting. I know you've got more there, and I want to come to it. But that's interesting.
Yeah,
this corporate charter.
Yeah.
So how did it go away? I mean, if that was prescribed for like 100 years, how did it go away? Was that a way of saying, well, we need businesses to be more free to do what they want to do? Was that the premise? And I'm trying to understand, like, because a lot of this stuff gets sort of slid in, in some kind of form of lubricant. What was the lubricant for this nonsense?
It is slippery, isn't it? It is slippery. It's, these things don't happen overnight. There wasn't one decision that changed that. But what did happen was, over the decades, numerous court decisions that allowed specific companies to have a little bit more leeway within their project charter, right? So I built a company, hypothetically, I built a company in the 1920s with the specific intent of building a bridge across a river in a major American city.
Right.
I finished that bridge, and then I wanted to go back and readjust my corporate charter so that I could extend the highways on either side, or I wanted to build the company that was going to toll that bridge for an extended period of time. Right. So I was given permission through court challenge to build those other aspects onto the business. And so suddenly now I'm in 3 different lines of business, and there isn't a clear end date for the project. So we've suddenly got a bigger, broader corporate charter, and over time, court decision after court decision sets precedent and allows companies to focus in different areas of being. I think it got really tricky. It got really, really challenging in the late 90s, early 2000s, when companies started to play with these really complicated financial products, right? And that led us to the really, really difficult economic recession, as they call it, of 2008.
Yeah.
Right. I think my view is we've allowed businesses to get a little too far out on the experimental edge with products and services, and we're not doing enough to hold them account to the social and environmental responsibilities that they need to pick up and control.
But a lot of CEOs, a lot of high-level entrepreneurs would say, listen, I don't want the government in my business. And it should be none of their business. If this is the world, if the US is the world, even the Western world, is the world of free enterprise, then in the context is free enterprise. You don't get to restrict. And I don't think that that's where you're going, but I want to stop it before people start thinking that. We're not talking about restricting, but this idea of a charter. Tell us what a charter was actually about, because I think this is something that, when I do a lot of work with companies around purpose, and I see a link here. I see something that
strong parallel,
hand in hand, heart in heart.
Yeah, I mean, we all business people have a mission statement, and of late, more and more companies are working on a purpose or a vision beyond the day-to-day of the organization, right? Jim Collins called it a big, hairy, audacious goal, and the exponential organizations guys call it a massive transformational purpose. But purpose is great shorthand, fantastic phrase. What's the purpose of the business? Why are you doing this in the first place? What is it that you're setting out to achieve? And if it is just shareholder expectations and shareholder returns, that's fine. But there's opportunities that you might be missing by thinking about the role of the business contextualized in the community it serves, the community from which it draws its labor, and also the planetary environment, which we know is under threat.
Right. So
these points about grander purpose are actually about contextualizing the business in really, really important ways. So back to the point about, get out of my business. Let's leave the free enterprise market to be free. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's fine. We know that there have been instances historically in business where governments have had to step in and create legislation to ensure workers' rights, to ensure pollution doesn't run amok, right? That's not really what I want to talk about. What I'm more interested to talk about is the positive. What's the carrot that complements the stick? Right. And there are really two main reasons that companies come to us wanting to talk about these social and environmental sustainability pieces. So one is they recognize that there is public relations risk and public relations opportunity in serving the common good. Right. So it's their marketing leaders or their PR leaders or CEOs that are publicly engaged that are coming to us and asking about how they can build a proactive strategy to engage the communities where they work. Sometimes just so that in case something goes awry, they've built the goodwill and have the relationships in community that they can manage a challenging period. Mm-hmm. So that's reason number one is the PR piece. Reason number two is increasingly becoming the HR piece, right? It's about people.
Absolutely.
So we've now got a generation moving into the workforce that are going to be stepping into managerial roles at significant levels in the next 5 to 10 years. We like to call them millennials.
Yeah, they all saw them in 2017 is 37 years old. So they're certainly old enough for those leadership positions.
That's right. And here's a cohort of people that are utterly perplexed by the notion of working 9 to 5 and giving back 5 to 9. This is a group of people that's really interested to blend their sense of purpose in the world and in life with their work. And they just don't understand. It's not that they refuse to separate them. It's they don't understand why you would, right? This is a nonsensical conversation. No, this isn't true across every single millennial, but it's largely true across a significant number of them. Absolutely. And more companies are wrestling with how they recruit millennials, how they engage millennials, and how they retain millennials, right? A lot of millennials have this nasty reputation of hop, skip, and jumping through jobs. They'll stick around for 2 or 3 years, and then they're on to the next shiny thing. I think actually what it is, and if you sit down and speak to some millennials about it, what it actually is they're not finding the healthy workplace that they're looking for, and they're not finding the healthy workplace where they want to put their own energy and make it healthier. So they move into the next thing. They're constantly looking for the next great opportunity.
Yeah, and I think that people, certainly we spoke about it a lot on this show, but as employers, we have to understand that millennials are driven by completely different motivational forces than the previous generations, Gen X and baby boomers, and that right at the top of their list is meaningful work. And if the work ceases to be meaningful, they will go somewhere else. Aside from the fact that high stimulus and all those things that, we can talk about them having grown up in a different age with screens everywhere. But this piece around meaningful work is, there's a story I tell, an example I give, and it's this, is that Ralph has applied for a job in a company, and he's very excited about it. He spoke to the HR person. The HR person spoke to him. He's very excited. This looks like a great opportunity for Ralph, he's like 32 years old. He's a young man, but he's driven. He's excited, and he wants to go. So he goes to the office and to meet the HR person. They've had several conversations over the phone. Now he's there. He's getting in the office. He walks into this beautiful reception, walks up to the front desk, says who he is. The receptionist says, "Oh, yes, you have an appointment. I will let the HR know that you're here. Would you like something to drink?" And he says, "Yeah, thanks. That'd be great." And the receptionist said, "Would you like room temperature or cold water?" He said, "I'd kind of like cold water." So the receptionist reaches underneath, takes out a plastic bottle of cold water and gives it to Ralph. Ralph goes and sits down, and they wait for HR. About 5 minutes later, the HR person comes out and asks the receptionist, "Where did Ralph go?" Maybe he went to the bathroom. Where does Ralph? No, Ralph did not go to the bathroom. Ralph is gone. And I ask, why is Ralph gone? And the answer is, you gave him a plastic bottle of water. And that plastic bottle told him you don't care about the environment. So you can have he was excited about the job because on the website it looked like you cared, it looked like you were a sustainable company, it looked like you had social responsibility, but you're not walking that talk. And this is what I think that so few companies understand, because I know, like I'm in my 50s, and I know that when I entered the workforce, people of my age said, "Yeah, I'll stick it out, I'll try it, I'll see how it is in this job. We'll give it 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. Now, millennials are leaving in 1 day, and sometimes not getting past the interview. Not because they got rejected, but because they can reject. And that, what you're saying there about that having meaningful work and having a social responsibility is vital if you want to have great talent. So that's a very important, that HR piece you're bringing up is a vitally important piece that I still know many companies are missing.
They are. Yeah.
What's the third one?
It's interesting. A couple of things on that. One is when we do branding work with our clients, one of the things that we work on is helping them to understand their authentic values. Now, authenticity is one of these pieces of jargon that's floating around left, right, and center. We have a very specific definition for it. What are the core values that you hold to through thick and thin and through time, right? What are those values that really shape your decision making? So that company could have had cold water on tap and available in a ceramic mug for Ralph. Instead, they had a cold bottle of water. But let's look at the experience of giving him the bottle of water. Would you like a cold bottle or a room temperature bottle? The fact that they had it refrigerated under the receptionist's desk at all speaks to a value of hospitality that Ralph might not have felt was important as his value of environmental responsibility. So is it true that the company has touted this sense of environmental sustainability at the top of their list, or is this a company that actually promotes their value of hospitality and lives up to that? How do they make decisions?
Yeah,
right. Hospitality is a beautiful value. It's tremendous. Yeah. It just may be a different value than the one that Ralph was looking for, and so it's great that he stepped away and went to look for a place where he'd have a better fit.
Right, and that is indeed a great point. But again, we go into a company and we see they have a mission statement, and we ask them what their values are, and it's like, it's stuff like innovation and customer service. I'm like, oh my God, right. Like, could you be more generic? Like this right. These are words and titles and mission statements that are pulled out of the latest book of what's cool and trendy. But if we dig underneath, what does that actually mean? What does innovation mean to you? And, really what it means is, they're going to tweak things. What does customer service mean? Well, we always make sure our customers are happy. Listen, that's table stakes. Everybody's doing that. Nobody's
exactly
in business going, we've decided we're going to stay stuck. And we're really not going to take care of our customers. Even United Airlines have that on their website.
Yeah. How's that going for them?
It's not working so well, right? So this is a very important piece, and I think people have got to get it. So just coming back to that piece that you said around core values, because I think this becomes a social responsibility, sustainability, etc. It's very easy for it to become a concept. And what I mean by that is even a company who says, yeah, okay, we got to do this, we got to get Mike and his company in, we got to do this. But the sort of undercurrent is, however, when the feces hits the fan and things get a little financially tight, well, then we're going to stop with all this nonsense of, having a foosball machine, or letting people have a little extra hour here, or letting them put time into the NGO they volunteer for, or whatever it might be. How do you get them to grasp that in the tough times, that's when you have to stick with it?
Well, okay, so there's two parts to that. One is in the tough times, when the going gets really, really tough, it's actually true that socially and environmentally responsible businesses fare better. So through the 2008 crash, B-Corps were 64% more likely to still be in business after the crash than a shopping basket, a group of traditional corporations. Now, B-Corps are, the B-Corp movement is now some 2,300 businesses around the world that have completed a pretty complex rubric on various aspects of sustainability, good governance, workers' rights, so on and so forth, and achieved a score high enough that they're then invited to certify as a B Corp. So this is now an international movement. There are 2,300 companies that are certified, but more than 60,000 businesses have taken the assessment That's a massive number of businesses that have taken the assessment.
Right.
And they're all looking at ways that they can fine tune the health of their organization so that it's a more resilient organization, so that it can weather these downturns. But there's abundant evidence now that socially and environmentally responsible businesses fare better when the proverbial feces hits the fan.
So tell us, I mean, I've got my answer, but I'm really interested to hear yours. Tell us why you think that a B Corp does better in a downturn than a traditional business, which would say, listen, batten down the hatches, we got to cut the costs and still remain above the water, versus a B Corp which says, no, we're going to stick to our sustainability and our social responsibility. Tell us why you think they do better. Because, on paper, it looks like that wouldn't work.
Right. So first off, we've got to expand our definition of sustainability to include things beyond just environment, right? So when we hear the word sustainability, it typically conjures environmental sustainability, which is fine, but there's more to a fully sustainable organization. So the social impacts. How well are you looking after your workers? How well are you looking after stakeholders beyond your shareholders? How is the organization governed? Are you running the organization in a healthy way? So on and so forth. So the first thing is let's hold that broader definition of sustainability, which influences a lot of different aspects of the business. But the second thing is, I think it's an easy error to make, a fallacy, to assume that behaving sustainably costs more money. Mm-hmm. In fact, a lot of the time you can find sustainable solutions that actually save the business money, right? So a lot of the early round of sustainability efforts were to do with carbon output and energy use.
Yes.
But by building more sustainable energy practices, organizations were able to save significant money. Oh, and by the way, make more healthy workplaces as well for their workers, right? So it's an easy mistake to assume that spending on sustainability is a cost. Sometimes investing in sustainability can drive returns elsewhere on the profit and loss statement. The other thing that I'd say is it's absolutely fine to cut some of these things when the going gets tough. Mm-hmm. You're only going to be a sustainable enterprise as a business if you can continue earning a profit, right?
Of course.
Start eating too far into your profits and the business isn't going to endure. So financial returns are a key element of sustainability. And if you're investing too far, too early, too deeply in significant sustainability efforts, then you may put the overall health of the organization at risk. So you pick your places, you choose carefully, and when you can afford to invest in the next step, you invest in the next step. But people can't be scared to step back from those investments when the going gets tough, right? We all have to make hard decisions in business when the downturn happens. I've been through enough cycles now that I know some of these decisions ahead of time. I know what's going to have to happen in the next recession, and it's always unfortunate, and it's always disappointing that the momentum slows. But it's more important to make the cuts, keep things stable, and then live to thrive again when the economy turns back up.
Well, I think there's another piece in that, and that is that if you are, particularly if you're a B2C company, the research shows that, and I've forgotten, forgive me because I've forgotten the percentage, but it's very high. Like certainly over 50% of people want to do business with a company that is socially responsible. So
that's right.
If you're not, so the reason that, so company A is socially responsible, company B is not, the downturn comes, I'm still going to have to spend my money. I might be spending less of it, but who am I going to spend it with? I'm going to spend it with a socially responsible company because that's in the value of the customer now. And I think that that's the other thing that people think. So they go, yeah, well, we can undercut, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But if you understand that even in downturn, that your customer cares about that, they're going to go, yeah, well, when the feces hit the fan, you really didn't stay true to your values. Right. And I'm going to say, I'm going to go over there and I'm going to take care of that. I'm going to go with that company. And I know lots of people who pay the extra $1, even extra $10 for something because they believe in the company's purpose, they believe in the company's values. And this is an important piece that I think that people forget in the power of being a socially responsible organization.
So the last data that I saw, and I may be wrong on this, but I think it was a report from the American Sustainable Business Council, said that 88% of consumers prefer to deal with a brand that upholds positive social and environmental values.
There you go.
So that number is interesting because that's an overwhelming number, but it's also interesting because it just speaks to public awareness, right? More and more consumers are thinking about the social impact of their purchasing dollars, and they're making choices that align with their values and the world that they want to see.
Yeah, I think this is so easily missed and so important. So if a company is grasping this, okay, they kind of grasp this, okay, this is important. What's the first step for them? And is it a first step only for people who are, or companies that are over a certain mark? So, we're a $10 million company, so we can do this, or we're a $100 million company, so we can do this. Where, even if, no matter what the size, if they're starting out, where do they start? Where would you advise them?
The first start is really understanding where you're having a positive and negative impact, right? And there's a few steps in that. So the first thing is, let's have a look at the environmental or social impacts that might actually be a threat to the organization, right? So these are the things that are close to home, that are potentially threatening if something goes awry or if there's a public relations challenge. Right. Let's have a look at what those issues are that are close to the organization and that would have a viable impact on the business, a material impact on the business, to borrow accounting language. So let's just, for the sake of the conversation, assume we're a textiles company. We make clothing, and we're actually really concerned about the amount of water that gets used, the amount of fresh water that gets used in our production, right? And particularly if we're dealing overseas where there are droughts, perhaps, maybe water use is something for us to be really careful about considering. Now, the second question is, how much control does my business have over the issue? Maybe there's an awful lot of water that needs to be used to produce these garments. But maybe there are new practices, new approaches where I can actually significantly reduce the amount of water use. So I can have significant control over that. But let's consider that another issue facing that same textiles company is that they're concerned about women's body issues. They're concerned about obesity. They're concerned about anorexia. So they want to consider in their sustainability thinking how they can have an impact on this really important interlinked group of social issues. But they have a lot less control over that.
Right.
They can control how much water they use, but they can really only have a bit of influence on these issues of social stigma around body shape, body form. So maybe that's not the first place for them to start, but it's a place for them to have on their radar. Right. So that's where we like to start. What are the issues that are going to have a material impact on your business? And then which of those are ones where you can actually have a degree of control? And a couple of reasons for that. Obviously, you want to do some work, make some investments where you can actually make some change happen and derive some value back. But secondly, it's also really important to get the early wins. Right? Don't bite off something that's really, really challenging, where the chances of success are low. Bite off something that's going to immediately contribute back to the business, that has a social or environmental impact, and that you can actually earn a win. You can actually do something useful and meaningful. And that's a great way to start.
So
Go on.
Second step, yeah.
Second step is, so you've done a campaign, you've radically reduced the amount of water that you're using. Please tell the story. Please share that with your industry. Please share that with your customers. Let everybody know what you're doing and how you're doing it, because there's other organizations that could use the same technologies. Maybe there's a new technology you've developed and that's licensable and there's a new revenue line in that. Maybe it's just good to collaborate with your peers in industry, because if you share some insights with them on issue 1, they might share some insights with you on issues 2, 3, and 4, right? Companies need to get comfortable telling these sustainability stories. And so what we're starting to see now is a significant trend toward blended annual reports, where we're not just getting a financial annual report and then an optional sustainability report. We're starting to see integrated reporting, where these ideas are blended, and companies are and we think over the next few years that's going to be the way reports get developed. They're blending the story of how we're doing business with the story of the financial returns of the enterprise. So I really, really like to tell leaders to please tell the story, broadcast the good work that you're doing, because you have every right to. You should get the kudos for doing this great work.
Yeah, and I think the other thing around that is that world has changed. I mean, the whole idea of hoarding things and hoarding the knowledge or hoarding the technology. I mean, this is something that a lot of leaders are having to really learn to let go of. And of course, the great example of it was Elon Musk when he released all the patents on his electric motor. And people were like,
right.
What the hell are you doing? And he released it. You know, GE picked it up and a bunch of other companies grabbed it. And he said, because the higher value was making the planet a safer planet and taking care of the planet. Right. And it's interesting because, you know, whenever something dramatic happens like this, one of the things because of my background in psychology, have people grasp is you will always get a polar response. So you've got this massive movement towards social responsibility, and on the other side, you've got, well, let's remove all the EPU, let's get rid of caring about the environment, let's remove all restrictions, you can put whatever the hell you want into the river, you know, all that stuff. It's fascinating to me that there's this two sides. And one is obviously out of scarcity and feeling like the job is going to go away. But the other piece around this, and this is what I want to touch on with you, is the other piece around this is getting people to grasp what I would call business evolution. In that things are changing whether you like them or not. You can't do anything about it. You know, somebody was interviewing Gary Vaynerchuk and said to him something about, we're doing this to our children. And he said, we're not doing shit to our kids. This is evolution. This is what's happening. This is the change. And you got to face it or you're going to get eaten alive. And it's the same thing here. That polar response is we've got to take care of these 70,000 coal worker jobs, which is such a minuscule amount of jobs, and it's so ignorant of AI, which is going to take far more jobs than any of that. And, you know, for me, being the age that I am, and I was born in the UK, lived there till I was 21, I watched the steel industry disappear. I watched the shipping industry disappear. And I watched the coal miners strike. You know what? I get it. I understood what they did. I understood all the shipyard strikes. I saw all that. I did. But did it change it? No. Did it slow it down? Not really. It still went to those other countries. Now, did the UK go into a full economic meltdown? Of course not. There's an adaptability. And one of the things that I like about what you're saying around sustainability is, like, it's not just get on board because it's cool, not just get on board because it's a good PR stunt. It just is. This is the movement. You can stand with your placards about keeping the mining jobs, but this is where we're going, whether we like it or not. Yeah.
So find the opportunity for yourself in this work, because there's definitely one there. And you know, this isn't new, right? There's plenty of practices out there that leaders today can learn from. I mean, we've talked now about millennials and we've talked about B-Corp, both of which are new trends in the last 10, 15 years.
Sure.
But I'm a member and sit on the board of directors of an American organization called the Social Venture Network. And this is going to celebrate its 30th birthday this year. And this is a network of social venture leaders, social entrepreneurs that have been thinking this way for 30 plus years. This is a group of people that have seen incredible success. Like Ben and Jerry of Ben and Jerry's Ice Cream are among the founders. They've done okay.
Yeah, they've done all right. I wouldn't mind a small percentage of their profit.
I'll take a piece. Yeah. I shared a stage a few weeks back with another founding member, a guy called Gary Hirschberg. Now, Gary built Stonyfield Farms, the world's biggest organic yogurt producer. And he's used his brand as a platform to advocate for farmers' rights and for organic production and against genetically modified organisms and so on. He's used it as a little bit of an activist platform, but he's built an extraordinarily successful business, hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, it was acquired in 2001 by Danone, big French holding company, right? Danone has recently said that they're going to certify all of their companies that they hold, all of the brands that they hold, as B-Corps.
Wow.
So this is the kind of thinking that's bubbling up into major organizations. Danone recently acquired a holding company called White Wave. It's been rebranded Danone Wave. And this company owns, it's about a $12 billion enterprise that they acquired, and it owns a bunch of food brands. And in the press release, when they announced the closure of the deal, the CEO of Danone Wave said straight up, in 10 years, nobody will be thinking about old business and sustainable business. Sustainability will be how we're doing business.
Fabulous.
This from the chief executive of a $13 billion publicly traded food company, right? Significant enterprise. So this isn't just about small social entrepreneurs and individual, concerned citizens. This is big business. This is the real deal. This is where business is going. Amazing.
It's fabulous. So, you've been an entrepreneur. You're part of the entrepreneurial world. How did you get into this side? Because this is, this, as you said, really is a pretty new thing nonetheless. I mean, you've got this group you talked about, but generally speaking, it's pretty new. How did you move into that world?
So I started in advertising and communications and did a lot of branding work. And about 12 years ago, I started doing some work with a small nonprofit here in Vancouver. And I did it pro bono. I took a seat on the board at the invitation or the pleading of a friend who needed some support on his board. And we did a rebrand of this nonprofit. And I just found it incredibly stimulating. The challenges were more difficult because we were thinking about multiple bottom lines.
Right.
So we had to keep financial bottom line, which in their jargon is driving more fundraising and watching the cost of services. But we also had to think about the social impacts that we're having. Were we actually serving the membership of this organization? Were we making better outcomes for them in terms of their health? And the layers of complexity in the planning and the branding and the storytelling really appealed to me. So I started doing more and more work in the nonprofit world. And a lot of that work was fully compensated, right? We do well off the 50% of our clients that are in the nonprofit world. It's not true to assume there's no money just because they're nonprofits.
Right.
Built a healthy business there. But now, 12 years on, we stand pretty comfortably with one foot in the business world and another foot in the social sector. Right. And what we've found really interesting the last while is just translating lessons from one to the other. Right. So we started to talk about branding in the nonprofit world 15 years ago at a time when the nonprofit world wasn't interested in that conversation. That's a business practice. We don't do business here. Well, that's changed a lot over the last 15 years as they've come to see the value in building a brand around a nonprofit cause. Yes. More recently, we're taking nonprofit ideas and moving them into the corporate sector. Right? If you're a company that controls specific outputs, how do you think about the social and environmental outcomes that result from the delivery of your products and services? Yeah. Well, that's something that nonprofits have been thinking about for years. They deliver programs and services in service of a bigger goal, and they think about that in their strategic planning. So now we're taking lessons from the nonprofit world and applying it in the business world.
That's a shock.
And the blending of the two, it's fascinating, right? We're seeing nonprofits launch enterprises. The social enterprise movement is growing at an incredible pace. Nonprofit businesses that funnel their funds either directly into programs or just funnel their funds into the treasury of the nonprofit. This movement's going leaps and bounds, but it's an enterprise framework that's borrowed from the business sector and is serving nonprofits. And then businesses are being pulled towards social responsibility and environmental sustainability by public demand, by the PR risk, by the human resource opportunity. So they're starting to get a little softer around the edges and think about impacts that they have that are broader than just the dollars and cents on the bottom line. So I've come to it, honestly, by doing real good work in the nonprofit sector and starting to see that there are lessons to be learned on both sides.
As we go through this program and viewers, our listeners are in the background there, what would you say is the most practical thing? We'll split this in two, and maybe it goes in two, maybe it's one answer. What is the most practical thing a C-suite leader can actually practically do with what you're sharing? And what is the most practical thing an entrepreneurial leader can do?
So, what comes to mind is attitudinal and philosophical more than nuts and bolts practice. And the attitude is to show up with spirits of questioning, of curiosity. Show up and learn. Mm-hmm. Don't presume to have all of the answers. None of us does, because a lot of these issues are evolving too fast. But we're seeing that the most successful leaders are the ones that show up with this just humble ability to ask the questions, stay in the conversation, and keep learning about sustainability and social impacts. Don't be surprised in a big enterprise if you find a little pocket that's not behaving sustainably, that's doing a few things wrong. but learn why. What is it in that department's management or leadership that has led them to be behaving unsustainably? What can be learned there that can be applied across the enterprise? And likewise, when you're finding those pockets that are doing really amazing work, inquire, understand how they got to be doing that incredible work and apply those lessons across the enterprise. But for me, leaders that aren't showing up with the spirit of inquiry, the spirit of curiosity, are already behind the 8 ball.
Absolutely.
Right? The minute you think you've got the answers, you're losing the game.
Absolutely. What do you think is the, when we hear the term social responsibility, sustainability, those kinds of terms, what do you think is the biggest misconception of an entrepreneur or a C-suite leader who's watching, listening to us? What is the sort of myth that you want to take the pin and pop the balloon? What would you say that is?
You don't have to do it all. You don't have to save the world. You don't have to solve all the problems. Just play the part that you can. Just bring an honest intent to do the bit that you're capable of doing in the context of the capacity of your organization and make some positive steps forward. But you don't have to feel like you've got to solve absolutely everything, right? There's plenty of forgiveness, there's plenty of space, there's plenty of opportunity for continual improvement. But to think that you've got to solve the biggest challenges that are facing mankind, that just puts too much pressure on the individual leader and on the individual enterprise.
So do you think that those leaders do feel like that when they, the part of their reaction to the whole idea of sustainability is, I just don't know that we can make any difference. I just don't know if what we can do would actually even matter.
I think that's more common than we'd like to think it is.
Really?
And I think we see it in public policy conversations as well as in business conversations.
Absolutely.
Right? I've got 180 odd countries, 190 odd countries on the planet. All but 3 of them are signed onto the Paris Accord. So all but 3 of them have said, we're going to work together and make some progress here. And that should inspire hope and engagement across all manner of sectors. And yet there's 3 holdouts. Right? There's 3 countries now that have said, we're not signing on to this, or we're not going to stay signed on to this. That's given all sorts of people an excuse to step away and pretend that they don't have to live up to their own responsibility or take advantage of their own opportunity to be in this great work.
Yeah, but I see, but that for me is the interesting thing. Is that this is a show about leadership, but in the context of leadership, is that leadership very often, if it's going to really show up, leadership is about influence, and therefore it polarizes. And I did a piece back, I think it was in January, where I talked about the great things about President Trump. And one of the great things about President Trump is he's galvanized the women's movement. Right? That polarizing effect. Brought more women out at the beginning of 2017 to march about women's rights. And, of course, I know that was not his intention. I'm not daft. I know that wasn't his intention. But the point is that that's what it's done. And I think, I'm seeing that, since the U.S. pulled out of the Paris Accord, which really was a kind of flimsy accord anyway. People don't know, or to go look at it. Really, nobody was ever going to slap anybody's legs for doing it. It was like, Trump could have just as easily said, sure, and then done nothing, because there was no real big deal with it. However, the fact that he actually said no has actually galvanized a lot of people in the United States. So you've got state legislators in the United States. You've got mayors in cities who are saying, you know what, we're picking up the game. We're not waiting for the government. We're going to pick up the game. And that for me is ultimately sustainability, social responsibility. For me, at least, I think is a personal thing, and I think it's really about understanding and saying, instead of going, "Okay, boss, what are we going to do?" It could be, "Yeah, boss, what are we going to do?" But what am I going to do? How am I going to be socially responsible? Because for me, when I think about sustainability and social responsibility, I take it at a deeper level, which is the psychological social responsibility.
Right.
So if the environment sucks and we have a horrible culture where people are dismissed or disrespected or humiliated or undervalued, there's a social responsibility in that too.
There is, absolutely.
So it's.
I'm really interested now to see so many baby boom entrepreneurs that I know thinking about succession. Right?
Yes,
they're going to exit their business, they're going to retire, they're going to sell their business. So they're thinking about succession, but really tightly tangled up in this thorny little knot of issues for them is succession plus legacy. What's the impact that I'm leaving behind? Am I going to sell the enterprise and use the proceeds to give back? Right. Have I been giving back? But what's the opportunity here for me to do something really meaningful as I transition out of the business? What's the next generation of leadership going to look like? What's the opportunity to use the business as a force for good while I'm still in it and actually use it as a means to drive the legacy that I want to leave behind, right? This is becoming a more and more common conversation, and it is about the psychology. It is about personal perspectives on self and impact and leadership and legacy and mortality, right? What do I want to do with my time on the planet? How do I want to be remembered? Right? This is becoming a really interesting conversation in the context of sustainability with baby boomers.
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing this in the family business world, multi-generational family business. And for those of you who are watching, listening, thinking, well, is that the mom and pop shop down the road? No, Johnson & Johnson is a family business. Right. Just to give you a perspective. In fact, the GDP of most countries, the largest portion of it that's business related is in fact family business. So it's this multi-generational and understanding that it's always been a challenge, which is keeping the multi-generational family business past the third generation. But that's becoming more and more and more of a challenge because the next gen leaders who are stepping up are saying, you know what, I don't like what we stand for. And when they're bumping up against the present generation leaders who are saying, this is how we do things here, you're going to see a lot of those businesses just fade away, just go away, because they'll get bought out. And and as you said, the legacy could be something phenomenal, but it could just as easily be a cash grab and walk away. And it's like the opportunity is right there. That's very important stuff. Thank you for sharing that.
Fabulous opportunity, a really important part of the conversation about leadership at the moment, I think.
So you are highly recognized. You speak all over the world. You're doing amazing things here. You're working with companies in 4 continents. You're working with all these great things. But nobody gets there instantaneously. Every overnight success took at least 10 years, and in some cases, 30 years. I think it's important for people to grasp that we need to continue to growing. What is something that you are working on, struggling with, trying to develop inside of your own organization? What is a block that you are trying to overcome right now?
I'm actively working on being more transparent in our business. So for no reason that was purposeful, we've just ended up in a business that holds a lot of information at the top of the organization and doesn't share it across the whole team. And the practice, and I do think of it as a practice, just like sitting and meditating or going for a daily run, the practice of transparency is a remarkable thing to play with as I step into that conversation in a couple of ways. One is I've started writing a regular post, Reflections of Our CEO, and I just talk about some of the more difficult periods during our history as a business and my history as a leader. And in sharing some of those, I'm stepping into conversations that I might not have been able to open otherwise with leaders that have faced similar challenges, right? Fabulous. But also, by being transparent with our team, I'm able to carry the sometimes stressful burden of leading the organization with a group of like-minded people that have nothing but support for the enterprise. So I'm actually making my job easier by being more transparent, which is fantastic.
So what do you think was one of the beliefs you've had to overcome to get to the level of success that you've gotten to?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, what comes to mind is I try to be as generous as I can within the business. And that means showing up at conferences as often as I can, sharing insights and ideas as much as I can, giving to organizations as much as I can. And I've had critics or concerned friends inquire whether that generosity pays off. Is that the smart way to be behaving? I have learned that, yes, generosity is in fact generative. The more generous I am, the more I get back. And there's something soft and woo-woo and karmic about all of that. But I can point to a record of spaces where I've been generous and I've shown up with that spirit of generosity, and I've earned business opportunities as a result that might not have come about if I hadn't shown up with that particular character of generosity.
That's fabulous. You know, Jack Welch, who was the CEO of the 80s, in the way, you know, you were talking about 80s before, and like cutthroat, vicious leadership. It's really interesting. I saw Jack Welch speak probably 5 or 6 years ago at the World Business Conference in New York. And it was interesting to watch how he had softened and changed. And he wrote a book called The Generosity Gene. And that he got the importance of generosity, not just in funds, but in spirit, in offering coaching, and in being generous to the belief in the people. And you know, it's really interesting that even the guy who probably would have personified a lot of that stuff you talked about in the 80s, has gone to that understanding, that softer side of the, you know, I've said this for years, that the most valuable asset in your company, everybody knows it's your people. Everybody says that. But do you live it? That's a whole different gig, right? And do you live it when times are tough? That's a different gig. But we know that the companies that do, as you said, do so much better. So let me ask you this, Mike. We're talking about those tough times. So we all have those days. We've all had those days where you wake up and, to use my term again, the feces is hitting the fan and it's doing a lot of it. And things are heavy and it feels a bit too much. And it would be far easier to pull the blankets over your head and pretend and go back to sleep, or, you know, just not go in today. What is it that turns your lights on, puts a fire under your life, gets you up in the morning on a day when it feels like it sucks?
Well, so the first thing that comes to mind is my relationship with my family, right? Might be a pithy answer to some listeners, but look, if I can get out of bed and have a cuddle with my daughter and a cuddle with my wife and give a high five to my 16-year-old son, that puts a heck of a spring in my step to get back to work and get on with things. But the other thing I'll say that's a bit broader, and back to the generosity piece, I took my degree in philosophy, mostly political philosophy. And one of the central questions for philosophy students is, what does it mean to live the good life?
Right.
What is a good life, right? And the answer that I always have comes back to human relationships, right? How am I living a good life? I'm living a good life by building really deep, authentic, meaningful, emotionally secure relationships with other human beings. I try to do that with my staff team at Junxion. We all try to do that with the clients that we serve at Junxion. And when I talk about generosity, I'm not talking about writing checks all the time. I'm not talking about giving ideas. It's that spirit of generosity, the ability to meet people where they are and help them confront the challenges that are making their day hard and making it hard for them to get out of bed. And it's a lot of those relationships that I'm now able to lean back into when I'm having a rough day myself, right? Dozens and dozens of clients, hundreds and hundreds of colleagues that we've worked with over the years. The ability to tap into any or all of them for a little bit of support when you need it. Just pick up the phone. But there's something incredibly valuable in doing that work also as a daily practice, right? To live in generous relationships.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for this. Thank you for being a great guest on the show. And I really hope that we've inspired people to look at sustainability, social responsibility in a rather different way than I think the rigidity of how people see that world. And I really want to thank you for your generous sharing on that, which has been very cool.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
It's been great.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, it's been fabulous. Thank you, Mike. Please tell our listeners, our viewers, where they can find out more about you, about your organization, potentially bringing you in to speak or offering your services.
So you can find us at junxion.com, and being creative, we spell it funny. It's Junxion, junxion.com. And my contact info is on there, along with a guide to corporate social responsibility that you can download and read through.
Fabulous. So junxion.com, spelled junxion.com. And of course, we'll make sure that that's in the show notes so that you can get all that and get a hold of Mike if you'd like to. And I do encourage you to do that, to reach out to any of my guests and share with them what you got out of the show. It's important that they know that they had impact on you. They took their time to be with you. You know, Mike's a busy CEO, got a lot to do, working with international companies, and took time to be here with you to share his knowledge. So thank you, Mike. Appreciate it, man. It was really great to have you here.
Thank you, sir.
And,
my pleasure indeed.
It's fabulous. And I want to thank you, dear listener, dear viewer, for tuning in. And remember to share the show with everybody. You know, as we say every time, don't just listen, don't just watch and have things like going on in the background. Reach out, do something with this. And like Mike said, you know, when it comes to social responsibility, when it comes to sustainability, it's not about doing it all. It's about doing what you can. Sure, you're going to push yourself a little bit out of your comfort zone, and that's a good thing. But this is not about you having to save the world on your own. And I really like that about Mike's message, and I think it's important for you to take action. So please do that. And remember, the research consistently shows that one of the biggest challenges facing even the most successful companies can be somewhat counterintuitive. These fast-growing companies often hit a point where they realize that they're spending a fortune attracting, training, and developing talent, and then to have them disappear from them at an alarming turnover rate. If you're sick of investing in training and development for talent and then having them leave before you've got a return on investment, then come talk to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets in your organization. With our assistance, you can reduce employee turnover rate by as much as 80% in as little as 120 days, thus evaporating those horrendous costs. So, fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide you with the concrete soft skills to get your organization to the top and keep you there. Why? Because you can't outsource authenticity. This is Dov Baron and our Full Monty Leadership. Remember to stop by Matrix Matrix, like the movie, matrix.fullmontyleadership.com, and get your authentic leadership matrix self-assessment tool valued at $197, and you get it free for being a regular tune-in listener to our show. I'll see you next time on iTunes. This is Dov Baron, fullmontyleadership.com, saying stay curious, my friends, stay curious about the little bit you can do to be a little better at sustainability and move towards potentially being a B-Corp. Till next time, this is Dov Baron. I am out.